Welcome to your Unit 09, Lesson 2 Explainer. Today, we're doing a colonization assessment rehearsal. Now, I know you've got an epic 11-unit journey ahead of you this year, but right now, we're going to treat that vast timeline as a massive pool of evidence for your upcoming DBQ. We're going to practice building an ironclad, evidence-based response drawing directly from three key sources: the foundations of American liberty, the St. Paul Middle School framework, and the formation of an American identity. So grab your mental compass because it's time to build a rock-solid historical argument. Here's our roadmap for this assessment rehearsal. 1. Your U.S. history journey. 2. Unit 1, Early conflicts. 3. Sorting myth from history. 4. Unit 3, Forging identity. And 5. Thinking like a historian. Let's jump right in.
Section 1. Your U.S. history journey.
Take a look at this timeline. This represents the massive scope of historical context you can draw from to build your thesis. You see, a strong Unit 9 assessment response doesn't just look at one isolated event. You need to pull evidence across different eras to show cause and effect. The pacing you see here highlights a carefully sequenced chain of events, literally from colonizing native land all the way to facing the challenges of a new century. To formulate a cohesive, high-scoring argument, you've really got to understand how these periods fundamentally connect to each other.
Section 2, Unit 1, Early conflicts.
Okay, consider this essential question. How did colonization create both new opportunities and deep conflicts? I want you to treat this as a mock DBQ prompt. This is exactly where you can practice forming a distinct claim and examining different historical perspectives. For an advanced response, you've got to tackle both sides of the narrative. You have the economic expansion driving European settlers, juxtaposed directly with the devastating conflict forced upon Native American populations.
Now, let's deploy some key vocabulary and source details. If we use the St. Paul Middle School framework, you can establish a really powerful claim about how systems of colonization were deeply intertwined with transatlantic slavery. You'll want to pull specific reasoning from that framework to prove that early colonial development wasn't just, happenstance. It was a deliberate economic engine built on forced labor which collided head-on with complex religious piety and Enlightenment rationality.
Section 3. Sorting myth from history. A major component of a brilliant assessment response is addressing and ultimately dismantling common misconceptions. And a really frequent misconception you're going to encounter is the myth of entirely peaceful, cooperative early settlement. In your DBQ, you can introduce this simplified narrative as a counterpoint, then immediately contrast it with the evidence-based reality. Analyzing that tension between historical myth and complex historical fact, that demonstrates high-level critical thinking to your graders.
Section 4. Unit 3, Forging identity.
So, how did the United States define itself while expanding and dividing? This question offers another vital angle for your assessment. To synthesize a powerful thesis here, you're going to draw upon the Formation of an American Identity unit guide. You really must articulate how the nation was physically growing at this massive rate while simultaneously fracturing along political and social fault lines. Synthesizing those dual forces of expansion and division is just a phenomenal way to anchor your argument.
Manifest destiny. This is an absolutely crucial vocabulary term you need to deploy when analyzing that expansion. But remember, you aren't just defining it as a 19th century belief in justified, inevitable growth. You are evaluating its actual impact. In your reasoning, make sure to connect this relentless push westward to the intense reform movements and social upheaval happening back east. It's all about showing that historical cause and effect. Citing the tension between nationalism and sectionalism provides an excellent counterpoint and reasoning for a top-tier DBQ response. A strong historical argument acknowledges that fierce tug-of-war between a unifying national identity and deep regional divisions. Framing these concepts as opposing forces allows you to build a highly nuanced argument, showing exactly how these early ideological clashes became the foundation for literally everything that followed.
Section 5. Thinking like a historian. Okay, let's put this all together into a worked assessment response. Step 1. Make a claim using source detail. Drawing from the foundations of American liberty, you could state that early governance prioritized economic expansion. Step 2. Bring in a perspective or counterpoint. For example, note that, however, the St. Paul framework highlights that this expansion relied heavily on transatlantic slavery, contrasting ideals of liberty with the harsh reality of forced labor. Finally, Step 3. Evaluate with reasoning.
Therefore, the foundational American identity was inherently contradictory, balancing democratic principles with systemic exploitation. Boom! That is exactly how you build a layered, evidence-based argument.
Time for a brief student check. Are you ready to synthesize your claim, perspective, and reasoning? Here is your DB2-style rehearsal prompt to take away and practice. To what extent did early American colonization forge a unified identity versus create deep regional conflicts? Remember, defining your understanding of American history requires evidence, not just opinion. So dig into those sources, refine your arguments, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.